Okay, let's see. Hello everyone. This is Victor from Bucharest Software Craftsmanship, along with my friend Peter Schuler. Hello everyone in the room and on YouTube. Please keep in mind this is also live streamed on YouTube, and it will remain recorded at the following link. I put it in the chat in the Zoom room. Without further ado, I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. It comes very nice in the continuation of the discussion about unit testing that we had the past weeks. So, without further ado, Peter Schuler, Peter, please, the stage is yours. So,
Thank you,
thank you very
Victor.
much.
Yes, welcome everybody. Yeah, let's get started. I will talk about why bigger unit tests are better. And yes, I really believe that. So first, a little bit uh, Murphy, or about me. My name is Peter Schuler. I live in the Netherlands. I'm a developer, also trainer, coach. I'm getting old, so I've been writing code for a long time, and I'm really interested into test-driven development, clean code. I live in the Netherlands, and I'm married, I have a wife, kids, dogs, daughters, and I'm actually also quite big. I'm actually 2'4". Let's see if we can get it across. See, there's a lot of me. So as you can see, things being bigger has a very natural appeal to me. And if you develop it on the subject, then bigger naturally means better, because let's look at it. I mean, cars, bigger, better. Houses, bigger, the better. Paychecks, the bigger, the better. So yes, of course, unit tests should also be bigger. Now, of course, that's not entirely true, because if I'm coding, I usually like things small. So I like small methods. I like concise classes. So when I'm coding, I just like things to be small. And why then am I actually saying that unit tests should be bigger? So in this session, I will explain to you what I mean with bigger. I will also take a look at why we write unit tests, because that's of course a very important thing. I will explain you why they should be bigger. I will show you the benefits of making them bigger, and I will also show you how you can make them bigger. And in the end, we will see how big is big enough, because of course, things being too big is also not very correct. So when I'm talking about making tests bigger, I mean that tests should have a bigger test scope. So basically, I would like us all to move away from having this paradigm where we have a unit test and a class and they are tightly coupled together, to having a unit test which actually covers the whole graph of classes. So when I say that unit tests should be bigger, I mean they should have a bigger test scope. And of course, by giving them a bigger test scope, you will actually run into the problem that your unit test will grow as well. But first, I've prepared a bit of interaction. So I will ask you why you want to make your unit test bigger. So if all is working correctly, and it's also a bit tricky with those free online word clouds, is that if you scan this with your phone or you click the link, I hope somebody can spam the link in the chat. If somebody can scan it, then if all is well, then we should end up with a nice word cloud where you can actually put in your name, which is not really important. You can put in anything you like.
Can
And
you
then,
go back a bit to the slide to see the link? I want to paste
yes,
it on YouTube also. There are 40 people there. Okay, join. Thank you. Just
should
a
also
second.
be in your, yeah, oh, it's already there. Yeah.
No,
I
thank
already
you.
saw the first things coming in. Yeah, now I have the problem that you should actually scan this thing if you want it, and the link is there. So let's see. Already 2 people have found a way to input some information. Yes, I think that's also the first thing I do when I'm unit testing. It's potato. So don't be shy, people. There will be a lot of things here, and yeah, there they go. Based on these answers, I can already see that you guys sleep better. Yes, that's also my primary reason to write unit tests, is actually to have a better night's sleep when I'm actually working. But seeing all these answers, I can see that you're already a very mature crowd, in the sense that you yeah, world peace would also be a good one, but also peace of sleep. No null pointers. Yes, that's also a good one. But I must say that null pointers are basically something that is handled from the outside and not inside of your code. All right, I see a lot of things, and also people taking a lot of time to actually put some things in. So what I do here see is basically a lot of things that I would expect to see. Somebody saying to make Sonar happy, which is of course a good thing by itself, but it should never be your main goal to make Sonar happy. I will now take this thing, and what I see a lot is refactoring. That's in the middle of the word cloud. I've seen it a few times also as easy refactoring. People want to see if their tests, if their feature is complete. So that tells me that you're doing test-driven development, something that I really enjoy. So let's go back to the presentation. Thank you all for your feedback. So why do we use unit tests? Someone might say that he was forced to do it because he has to, or we need coverage, or the build won't pass if I don't have a certain amount of coverage. But we're already past that, so we're already at the lower part. So we're actually asking ourselves, is my code working? Is my code still working? Which is an even more important question. Do I dare to make a change to the code? And also, how will this affect other parts of the code? So it comes down to this: do I trust code? And it goes nicely with people who say that they want to sleep easy at night. Yes, the question about where the unit test will answer you is, do you trust code? Well, and that's really important to remember when we go down this hole. And then we can ask ourselves, why is a bigger test scope so important? So, and then if you look at this design over here, and you can ask yourself, which design is better? And you don't literally have to answer this, because the fact that one side is green, the other one is red, is also a big hint that you should choose the green side. So the one where everything is nicely decoupled, the users and the servers to a nice API, we like that design because we have less spaghetti. We have actually no spaghetti in this perfect world example. And this is not my drawing. This is actually a drawing made by Uncle Bob in one of his presentations, of one of his blogs, where he, with the title, I think it was, "Is TDD harmful to your architecture?" And it was the first blog where I realized that if we write our unit tests the wrong way, it will actually be harmful to us. And not very long afterwards, I had a discussion with somebody else who said to me, "Peter, I like writing unit tests, but then every time I have to refactor, all my tests break, and I hate that." And that is, I think, why bigger test scope is actually better. And I pointed her to this article and said, "Look, read this." And she went, "Oh yeah, you're right. This is exactly the problem that I'm facing." So let's look at this very nicely split out functionality, where we have a high level class, a response mapper, we have some elements below that response, we have sub-element mappers, and at the last level we even have an enum mapper, which maps probably some enum to from the JSON enums to core enums. And if we have the nice unit tests everywhere, we tie them very much together. And the moment we want to change something, then this entire structure of tests will collapse. And I think that is a very big problem. Because by tightly coupling your test to the coding of your structure, that means that when your code structure changes, your test structure will change. And it actually means that refactoring is a hell, or at least you have to do 2 refactorings. First, your code, which is what you like to do. Second, you have to refactor all your tests. And this revelation came to me actually when I joined the team. And when I joined them, they were middle in a big refactoring. They were literally changing the very central domain object of their entire code. So that meant, of course, that code wouldn't compile. And when we finally got the code compiling, then all our test classes wouldn't compile because they also had to change because the code was really tightly coupled. And what we just did at some point was just disable entire test suites or entire unit tests, and we're like, to do, fix this later. So what actually happens is then when we needed those tests the most to verify that what we were doing was only affecting the core of our application and not our APIs, because they still had to keep working, that when you need them the most, those small tests actually work against you. They just give you more work. So that's one of the biggest problems. One of the other problems that I see is that if you have these small unit tests, and if you go back to this page, can you sit down with a business analyst and talk to him why you need to map enum, the enum to another enum, and why you need a test that X basically says if the value is toys, then JSON, then it should be toy score, etc. You cannot discuss that with him. So I think it's really important that your unit tests make sense in a business. Somebody said, I want to know if I'm feature complete. Well, those small unit tests will actually give you a lot of coverage, or at least they will give you enough coverage to pass the build, but they will not be very open to machine gun testing, or you cannot actually expect see if you're feature complete. You only know that you have covered every test with a unit test. That every line is covered. You will not see if the business is done. Because you test your classes and you do not test their interaction. All right, let's see if my code is ready for this. So let's look at some small scope tests. I've made here some small code tests. So let's look at a money amount mapper test. So we have a money amount mapper in this functionality, and I can quickly explain you what I did. I made a small application. It's a microservice, of course, because otherwise it wouldn't be cool enough for this presentation. It's a shopping cart overview app, and if you're Amazon, then you probably have something that's similar like this. And if not, you should never make a specific endpoint or specific microservice just for this functionality. But can I zoom in? Well, we have to make do with this. So basically, you tell this application, I have a number of products in carts, I have a list price, a sell price, and then the answer comes back where it will actually tell you again the same products that you have in your cart, and it will also tell you how much discount you're getting, and it will give you the totals and also overall discount that you can then show on your website. So this is a small functionality, but you can easily see that this can grow into a much bigger business environment if you would, for example, give customers a refund or a discount based on if they are a VIP customer, or you can give B2B customers more discount if they buy more of a certain category. You can think of all kinds of business rules that could be applied in this service. And also it has now a nice JSON front end, but also as a separate service inside some kind of e-commerce application, it would actually make sense. But in the money amount mapper test, apparently a money amount wraps around a big decimal, which is the amount, and perhaps there could be more. This is also something to fight the urge to have the primitive object urge. So we wrap it nicely in a money amount. And apparently we have a money mapper test. And if we do the test, it shows us exactly what the code is doing. We also have something that's called a total amount mapper test, where we basically we take a, let's look at the code. So we take a total amount result and we map it to our output object, because this is a clean architecture setup with dependency inversion. So all the outgoing information is in its own output object, and that's basically a one-on-one copy. But if you look at the total amount result, for example, you see this is actually a smart domain object. So it has no getters or setters for these fields, because we actually only manipulate them when we add products. And then the total discount is actually being calculated on the fly when you want this information. But it also shows you that if you want to test this very isolated, you actually need to understand how this total amount result works. So you can create an object, but you cannot just set some value. So you need to actually make a product result, which then has its own product inside it. And then will actually, those values that go in here will actually make up here. But because we said, no, we are very pure mockist approach. We want to test this in isolation. So we're not going to test the money amount mapper mapper. We will just mock it, and we will also return 20. So of course, yeah, it then ends up that your asserts are a little bit silly. So there are two things wrong with the test. First of all, the amounts are really silly, and you need a lot of domain knowledge to really get this. And you could put this in a test builder, which would be fine, but it just doesn't feel good. Well, we have another solution. We can also just mock the total amount result, because that's actually a complex object, but it does have some getters that we can mock. And we just say return 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we can have actually a mapper that says, okay, if it's 1, we return 1, a money amount, and then in the end we can actually see that those fields map. Somebody says my eyes hurt. Yes, they do hurt. This is what you should never do. You should never start mocking your input objects. But what also happens is that if you don't do that, you actually need to have a lot of domain knowledge to get your objects. And that's something we want. You want it inside your domain. You want to use domain-driven development, and you want to be free to actually do this. So you see two examples of something to mock this as pure as possible. And I've seen this a lot in code, and that's why I realized that we should stop this. We should stop this practice. And I will show you one final thing. So let's go to our servers. Actually, here it is. It's a very complex thing. It will make from the products internal products. It will then make a result object for the total amounts. It will add all the amounts. It will then map those internal objects to external projects. So let's look at this. We have here a to product, and oh wait, this is actually doing something with a list. And then it calls a external mapper here. That's a bit silly, right? I mean, isn't this some information that we could hide somewhere? So let's refactor this. Let's say that this mapper. We have also a unit test here. I will run it, show that it's green. Actually, all the tests are green now. This is the we go later back look at a bigger test, but this test is green. Really nice. So let's now say that we will refactor this. Name this to a products information mapper. Yes, refactor everything. Totally fine with this, right? And now we will actually try to, if we can move this function into here, because products will also always be in a list. So why not do something like this? Let's say that this will be a list. And this will be a list as well. And then we just list from one list of objects to the other. Yes, that is the list I want. Go figure. So then I can say return source dot stream. I can actually say here map to product. I always forget to write lambda notation, so I'll just let let Eclipse remind me again. Yes. And we just return this. I mean, this looks like a good idea, right? This maps it in. Now let's go. We already see we have now 3 related problems. But let's first look at the servers. That probably won't compile because, oh, this is here. All right, so what we now basically can say is remove this. We can drop this function. And we have now cleaned up our main service. With the information that everything, and that we now take a list. So the entire thing, that the entire list manipulation is now inside the mapper. I think that's a great improvement. Let's run our test, see if it works. Oh, no, we cannot run our unit tests because our code won't compile. Because we now have mappers that are actually not working. So we changed the functionality, but this should only affect our internal code, but now certainly our mocks fine. Okay, but let's remove this one. Let's run it again, see if now we'll run. Oh, no, wait. Oh, wait, this mapper actually uses, oh, wait, so we have a mockers test here. Okay, so now I have to refactor this. And this thing has only 1 test. Go figure if you have 14 tests on this. Now your life is in hell because you have to think and you have to, all right, so this should be then off. Yes, of course, this I want. No. So now I have to fix all those errors and it's still not compiling. So let's just do this. Run the test again. All right, it works. I actually have seen this going wrong in the fact that we had this complex object structure. We had a lot of mappers, and then suddenly we realized that the 7th level of mappers, we need actually a Boolean to say whether or not we should use a minimal amount of data or use the full amount of data. And we realized that we had to pass that down through 6 levels and then fix 6 mockist unit tests. So I hope I've shown you now some of the examples. Not only do they look a bit silly, but they're also just plain harmful. Right, let's go back to the presentation if it wants to. Let's do it like this. That's what it wants. So I think with this problem, you see that those classes look really silly. And what I think is that you cannot map them on functional requirements. So you cannot discuss them with the business. You cannot sit with them and say, look, yeah, we have a money amount object and it has to be JSON amount object. So we map those together. It just won't happen. So, and if you look about the guys with the big thinking heads in our world, then they actually, that in the beginning they said, oh, I like mocking, and I think mockers TDD is not that bad, but you see that they're getting more and more concerned with coupling those tests to implementations. the thing is, you're not thinking about functionality. You're thinking about which class is calling which class and which input and which other class is it calling all the time. Well, that should not be your first thing to worry about. Your worry should be, how do I add value for the business to this system? So to make a bigger scope better. So what can you do? Now let's look at something, a high level interface. This could be a service, a REST controller, etc. It could be anything basically, but we have all those things. So then basically we need a unit test that tests actually against this service. Now, things that you then probably need. Something happened to my screen. I hope I didn't disrupt the stream yet. Let's move some stuff back. Sorry guys, I had some technical problem over here that I didn't experience before. So when you test on a higher level, you also need to have actually the I wonder if I'm actually on power. Hang on. Oh, I'm full powered, and now PowerPoint is gone again. But we quickly fix that.
Try to scroll with 4 fingers left. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I want to have here a Mac still not used to it. So we have a high level unit test. That also means that you probably need a lot of data in there. That's one of the things that you need to fix. So you probably need some test data generators. You might want to make some matcher helpers, which I will also show you in this presentation. And then of course, we also have stuff that does things with the database. So you might need some test things that set up your database or whatever. You might need test doubles. You might want an in-memory database. You need to do some stuff if you also want to test your database. I see there's something from Guillama. Yeah, I'm bad with names, I'm sorry, but I think that's something we can address very well at the end of the presentation. So if we make them bigger, you get tests. I will show some of them to you. So if you look at this test, this one over here, this is a big test. It uses Spring to load the context. It auto wires the shopping service and directly tests against the shopping service. Yes, please keep asking questions and save up those questions also for the discussion, because I really feel that this is something that we could all learn, and I'm very curious to learn about your perspective on this. So here we have a builder, we add some products to the shopping cart, we fire it away, no mocking, nothing, and then at the end we can just sit with the business and we say, all right, so we put in some things, and then all right, these numbers match up. Oh, we also see that the equal is actually doing the right things. And if we have a bigger test over here where we have we have actually 3 products, we can actually see that the totals work, and we can have a discussion, and people can say, Peter, this is not a realistic scenario because we will never sell something for $7.99. And then also please note that this overall discount percent is actually wrong because you should actually subtract 100 from it. So this is, I can sit with a business analyst and he can point me out to errors in my response. And I think you can argue that if you involve more than Spring, it's more than a unit test. I don't feel that way. We can also look at another test I have right here, which is also a big one where you can, yeah, it's in Dutch, but this is actually a business scenario where we say, all right, the main thing I do these days is deal with mortgages, and then you have to calculate the income to see how much money people make and how much they can loan. So we basically have here somebody works, makes a lot of money, and he has every supplement income that there's possible to think of. But in the end, I can just check that then the income types that he has actually work with are correct. I can sit with the business analyst and say, look, is this correct? And he can say, yes, this is correct, or no, this is not correct. We revisit this one later, but you can see how bigger scope tests actually, thank you, Victor, actually make this much easier to understand what features are being implemented. So we can explain them to the business. Well, I showed you how you can make them. And before we go a little bit deeper in that, I will look at some of the things that you now need to fix. And I will show you what the test config contain, Resvan. The thing is, you need more plumbing code to set them up. That's one thing that you need. You need more asserts. You need more setup. You need to make bigger things. And if you want to test every small aspect of your code, every little if statement, every little exception that you could throw, that might be harder. It should not be impossible though, because if you think about it, if you have a small aspect somewhere that does something, then you should actually be able to reach there. I have seen code where they were excessively testing for null values, while they actually were being called by an API that is very specific, not null set on values. So there were a lot of if statements, a lot of added complexity to this class. Why there was no actual value in having them, except on that level, you had a very cool test that says, oh, put in everything with null and see if nothing breaks. Well, there's the one more thing that is a problem, if that these tests will fail when the business requirement changes. Oh, wait, that is actually what you want. You actually want your test to fail when a business requirement changes. So then I come to Kent Beck, who is somebody who knows a lot about unit testing, was one of the inventors. And the basic thing about tests is that you should couple them to behavior of the code and decouple them from the structure. And he then adds, if they fail on both accounts, it is a good thing. I agree, but ideally, and of course, if you start changing your API input, then yeah, you have to change your test. But that is a business-driven requirement. I mean, you will not change your API just because you feel it's a good idea. So let's look how we can make them bigger. And this is a very big example where we had a lot of different packages that we need to include. But let's look at some actual code. So as you can see here, we have a small component scan that says, all right, scan this core package and load all the classes. So this will just basically tell Spring, start the Spring framework, load all the classes into core. And then after that, it will just be, you need a small Spring extension to, you need to tell them which classes test config you need. And you can go ham on this. You can even, for example, you could add beans here. You could add here a override Hibernate session factory, for example. You could do all kinds of stuff in here that you can normally do with the Spring config. And then if you run this, you will see that it will actually start faster than I can think. It starts in less than a second. And you see that for the first test, it takes 361 milliseconds. But another test is just 6 milliseconds. It's just as fast as anything else would be. It might be a little bit slower because there are probably some Spring proxies and Spring magic ponies working in there than if you would do this test bare bone. And then think about it, if you have 24 tests in this class, then you hardly notice this. Yeah, I will look at directions. In this, there are, I think, 4 to 5 package classes. No, there are 3 actually. You can actually see this quite quickly. So there's this one, we have 1, 2 mappers, and I think this mapper has a submapper. But I've also seen with bigger things that the test that you saw on the PowerPoint will start in 700 milliseconds. And I think this also depends on the kind of things that you need. But the thing is that Spring doesn't start boot. This doesn't start Spring Boot, as Victor points out. It doesn't sprint. It doesn't start anything. So because we are using clean architecture and we have moved away all our expensive dependencies, we can test just against the core. And it's really easy to build this. And probably people who have a lot of experience with Spring even know better tricks. You can probably do a component scan or something. It probably is even a bit excessive to have a specific test config. So that is the plumbing code taken care of. This is one of the options that you have, and I think this is the best option. Wait, this is not the thing I want to show. This is also not the thing I want to show. I want to show you this. So as you can see, it starts fast. And then the benefit is that I'm not sure that let's show who has ever forgotten to add a component thing to a class. And then he started his Spring Boot. And then you got a null pointer saying, I do not know the class that you have. I mean, I have multiple times. With this, your unit test will actually fail in less than a second and will tell you what was wrong. So you can see that with this simple trick, you make testing really easy and fast. Of course, you have also other options. For example, you can just be your own dependency injection framework. As you can see, you can just add all those. I mean, we like to use injection of constructor injections in our stateless Spring classes, so we can just be our own Spring. And this is even faster, of course. You can use GUIs or something else, an alternative if you think it's too slow, but it's not too slow, trust me. And if you're using Spring, then why not test Spring? I mean, it's a free test. It tests just like it works. If you make a mistake in Spring, it will tell you. Only sometimes you have some conflicts and then you need to exclude certain beans because in your context, they don't make sense. But that also tells you something, like Victor also told us last time, that if the test tells you something, it's just too complex. If Spring is having trouble finding the right beans, then you might make your classes too complex. Then we have come to the test data, and this is one of the things I really love. And one of the tricks I picked up when I just started doing test-driven development, somebody told me, yeah, but I was like, you have created this object, and I said, oh, we have a block on it. I think it was long ago, someone that used test builders, and ever since I have been a big fan of them. I don't really like the object mothers. I don't really like them. I really feel test builders give you the best flexibility, and they would actually do the job quite nicely. So let's look again at this at the test builder over here. A test builder is basically a builder, but it sets some default values, and you can easily override them. So, like you can see here, every product that is built will have the same ID. That doesn't have to be a problem. It could be, and if that is a problem, you could basically also do this here. You solve your problem. So it's also a nice way to don't repeat yourself. You have a single object responsible for building all these objects. And one of the tricks you can see also over here is that actually you need money amounts. But when writing tests, having a money amount every time doesn't really make sense. So why not have just a big decimal? And then the test builder knows that it actually should be a money amount. So that allows for a nice way to make these tests. And the good thing about them is that they can be really flexible and you can change just exactly that part of what you need. But I will now show you one that I just made recently in production. And let's go there. That is actually this one. This is a builder. I call it a scenario builder because it makes entire scenarios. And as you can see, the build is quite simple, but it has this thing that it has for every income per appliance. So we have a map here where we say, all right, everyone has a unique ID apparently, because if you look here at how we make those aanvragers in Dutch, we say we have a ID and they have a list of mapped incomes. So in this builder, I abstract the fact that they should be in a separate list. So if you look closely at the code here, actually, you can see that you can actually tell a story. You can say, I have a builder. It has to use a certain date. We have a certain appliant with an ID. And then afterwards, we just add some incomes. That the fact that there should be another wrapper object is just something we don't tell the people over here. And here we have the same thing. These year amounts should actually be big decimals. But when writing a unit test, I can add value of everywhere. I can also just go into my scenario test builder and say, wait, this is actually the other, I can actually say, look, I just want them to be doubles because that type's much easier. So you can see that I can make it much more easier. And if you don't like to write new test builder everywhere, you can actually make some static methods, which kind of looks like an object model, where you can easily say, all right, I want an income of a certain type, and then I just return a builder and I can continue building on that. And then if I have a supplement income, I know that this should always be supplement. So I don't need you to tell me that. I will just make that. And here you can see indeed, because I found out when I was making this code that the UUID should be unique. So I was, oh wait, that's a problem. Oh no, wait, I just give them a random UUID. I also have given them a builder method to override it, which I actually am doing somewhere here because I have a test specifically for this. And I think one of the coolest tricks that I pulled off in this one is that we can have several appliances because most of the time people are married and they ask for a mortgage. You can do it alone, or there are two people. That's basically the things. So this is a test actually disabled. This was the first row. And there you say that for every income, I had to specify this is for this one, this is for this one. Then I added another. And I said, look, and then this one has another specific income. Because I was thinking like, look, most of the time we will just add somebody and then we want to add the incomes to those specific ones. So if you look at this code, I just made a private string here that's the latest applicant ID. And I have a method. And every time I do something with a applicant, I will actually save his ID. That gives me a method here that says, all right, when I add an income and I don't know for who it is, I'll just add it to the latest. There goes my laptop again. I have to find some solutions for that. There I'm back. I think it's just my screen that stops. So I gave it a helper function that I would never do this in production. I would never assume that when somebody calls me, I would actually just give it to the first one, to the last one that actually came to me. But this is test code. So who cares? So I also realized that especially in test code, you can play around with concepts. You can try something nice. I mean, of course, you shouldn't just have fun and do whatever weird thing you like, but you can try with some concepts. You can make a wrapper, and yeah, I would not like to have this in production code. I would actually be very happy with the fact that here we have a wrapper object that actually tells me that this is yes, we are allowed. Well, we're not allowed anymore, but this is old code, so we're still in Dutch. And yes, I guess there will be a lot of French code actually, seeing as they were not fond of English for a long time. But luckily that's also changing quickly. But yes, we are allowed to code in Dutch, but only for this. Our new code actually is all in English, but then you end up with things like translating a very complex domain because finance in the Netherlands are very complex to English terms. That also sometimes doesn't make sense. But we're not talking about languages today. We're talking about code structures. So you can see, you can actually see that that you can do a lot of nice tricks, and it ends up with a very nice way of defining. And this was just the first version, and I went back and I said, all right, let's see what I can improve, and I came up with this one. So, and this pays off. If you do this for a very small class, it doesn't make sense. But if you think, all right, I already know that I will have 7 business scenarios more, and I probably will make more tests myself. So I really believe in the power of test builders. I think Victor already shared some links to them last session. And you should not stop there. You should really try to think about, all right, what's important for my business? I think Valentino Kupak also showed some of these things where you can just say, give me a scenario with this and this and this. And you can build really nice things there, like here. So you can just say, give me a request with 2 applicants. They have an existing mortgage and they want to buy a new house and they want to sell their current house and build it. And this way your data creation becomes really, really creative and really expressive. Well, then the thing with, if you make your test bigger, you actually need more asserts because you need to make more, you need to make more changes. You need to do more things. So, and this is harder to mitigate, but it's also not impossible, as I will show you. So some of the solutions, just apply clean code standards. Also a good idea in test, just keep your code clean, extract methods, make them small. You can also test only small aspects. You can make helper functions and delegates. You can split up your test in multiple test classes. I once had so many tests in a single class. That was a very complex calculation. That I just made a positive and negative outcome and another class for the weird cases, that if there was no input or whatever. It still feels a bit artificial, but yeah, it worked. Well, let's look at some of those things. Because if we go further in this code, you can see, all right, so we made our object, we just put it in there, and then we check, does it have a size? And then I have a very nice, again, DSL that says, check that these year results without the obligations. So if people have to pay something, they have to subtract that. I say with the start year and end year. And I say, okay, the default result will be this. And then for 10 years, I want this all to match. And if you look at this class, if you go down, you will find that the check that method is actually just making an internal helper class that will take this list, the start date, end year. It has some setters where you can set the result. It has a default value. And then it will just go through the years. It will get the list. It will check that the year is the same. And it will then check all the values and check them to the default result. And this helper method is really just a start, because what will happen is that somebody will, for example, go with pension in 5 years, and then his income will change drastically and he has very different numbers. So I can already see that I will say something like matches for 5 years, or I might even end up that this default result will not exist and I will just make a big hash map with all the results and perhaps populate them. I don't know yet. I don't know yet where this code is going, but it's already there. I already have a very nice place where I can just use this checker. And then if you go back to this code, you will find that we have also something where we have the extra obligations. That is so, but if we look at this example, there are no obligations for this specific case. So that means that this should actually match the same thing. So I just copied this. I could just reuse the code, but with different input. And then, as I told you, there was a very specific case over here with these are income from business rent. So perhaps he owns a building and he rents it in a business context, and he makes some money out of that. So yeah, he wants to use that to buy a house as well. But there's a very specific rule that says, if you want to apply for this, then this rent income is not applicable. So I made, again, a helper function where I say, okay, take out this data. It should be for those years. Luckily, our API was really nice that this is always the same object. I can just reuse the same code. So if we come to machine code testing, I can copy this 500 times and just make a specific test case for this. And if you look at this specific result, you will actually see that it's quite a complex thing. So I have to get the first list. It also says for the first, I do some shortcuts here. This is test code again. It must compile, it must work, but I'm not going to worry what will happen if this is not there. Yeah, then your test data is wrong. And it will then filter, it will get the right one based on the UUID, and it will go on. Somebody asked for more explanation on machine gun testing. I can expand a little bit on it later, in a later stage, because it also comes to another thing, to another one of the questions. So I hope that I showed you here that actually you can do quite nice things with those tests. Because they are a very big scope, they can match one-on-one on your APIs, on your business input, and you can really do nice things. If you can, the nice thing about this is that you can just free flow with this. You can build something. As you can see, this was my first go with this. I used some internal objects and I could them set directly because it's an inner class, and I did this. And then I asked a colleague, I said, hey, let's look at this. What do you think? And we had some pair programming, and we came up with this, which is much more expressive. So I really like this approach. So there are a lot of ways to mitigate those asserts. And then we come to one of the last things of this presentation. One of the problems is that if you make them bigger, how can you test everything in one go? So it's really hard to test every small mutation. Well, you don't have to test everything big. It's still fine to write very specific tests for specific classes if that's what you feel is necessary. But then use stable interfaces. So if you have, for example, a subset of your application, a specific service that is really intensive, write some tests over there. And don't forget that you can test a small aspect with a big test. So I was just looking up what Uncle Bob was saying on unit tests on in his clean code book or Bible, although it's due for revision if I look at Victor's presentations correctly. But what he says about unit tests, it says he doesn't believe in a single assert per test. There are people who say, no, there should be only one assert in each test. But he says you should test a single aspect with a test. And you can still do that quite quickly. Because if you look at this example, this is a big test over here, but it only has a single assert because apparently if something is false, then the outcome should also be false. And this is something that you can do quite easily, because if we go back to the example of this test, you can quite easily say that, all right, this is a very specific case. And it was part of a business test. But if this was not a business, I would say, look, I would make a test that just checked if I have a fixed income, if that all adds up. And then for this one, I would just make a separate test. I would just copy this test, remove everything, remove all these tests. Perhaps one of these tests would actually stay to have a double check to see is it actually working, or if the totals add up. But then this should be the most important one. That in this specific case, for this specific income, we should not apply this income in this special case. And then you can quickly grow this single unit test, or as you can see, this single unit test has now 2 tests. As you can see, it only takes 6 milliseconds to add a new one. So why not add many more? So if you want to test something small, then please do. Make a test and just assert 3 things. You still go through the entire test scope, but in the end, you come back to, I only care about this one thing. And I think that is a really powerful way. So there's absolutely no way to think, oh, wait, now all my asserts have to be 15 pages long. No, especially not. And if you feel that I have this special case or I have a new requirement, well, if you have a new requirement, you don't need to test everything else. You just have to change the aspects of your test that were changed with this requirement. So going back to my presentation, I still have a little bit running time. So if you think about what should then be a big test, so I feel that everything that is a pure function, everything that will always return the same value, should be a very specific, can be in a big test. That includes layers in your applications, because if you look, for example, here at our specific API, our controller. I mean, this is a simple controller. It just takes some JSON, it will map it to the input objects for our service, and it will call the service. Of course, I can write a mock test over here. Now, what do I need to do? I need to create this JSON. I need to send it off here. And then if I want to check if the data is correct, I need to use mocking, and I need a argument catcher, and I have to check whether these match up. Yes, I can share the repo afterwards. I can write a complex test for this, but I can also just use a Spring-based test, also hang in the service, and just make sure the service calls, and then check whether or not I get the right data back. So I don't care about layers in applications. I just want to make my test as big as possible compared on the now I really lost my PowerPoint again. But we'll just fix that. So and if you go on and on, I mean, if you call external jars with our pure functions, why mock them? Just use them if you have your application set up in several layers. Controllers, databases, they can also be tested quite easily these days, although it might also be good to make some specific test doubles. So just mock your database completely out of the way, because yeah, you can get some hairy result in the sense that your unit test works on your in-memory database, but in production it doesn't. Or so databases, you can put them in scope. Be careful with them. And of course, as soon as you make an external network call and you depend on external systems, that's a no-go. Then you make a test double, or you actually use a mock. There's nothing wrong with the mocking framework. It's just the over excessive mocking that I think that we should really stop. We should drop the mock because it's really hurting us. And then again, you're in control of your own fate, so you can do whatever you want. It's a guideline, it's not set in stone, but just experiment with this. So what I want you to do, I want you to make your test scope bigger. Start with that today. I want you to stop excessive mocking, and I really, really want to base your unit test on your business data. So try to sit down with your business analyst and talk about him, talk with him, and see actually what he wants the system to do. So, and the things you should not do is stop writing unit tests, because they are far too important. You should still feel to test small. Things I would actually test small are, for example, validations. If I want to test my validation API, I wouldn't set up an entire big test. I would just validate my object and see if that works. And you don't always have to think big, but please consider this. By making your test scope bigger, you will actually make your code better, and you will add a lot of agility to your system and resilience. With this, I thank you all for your attention, and I'm looking forward to have a discussion.
Are you sure? There were like 50 questions and ideas along the way. One recurring topic is the word integration test. And they keep asking,
Yeah,
isn't this an integration test if you put Spring in this? Can you tell us more?
Yeah, you can. I've never seen a strict definition of an integration test, so I don't feel that there are integration tests. I don't care about the distinction also that much. A test should just be a test, and they should be fast. Well, you've seen they're fast. So yeah, I feel integration tests are when you exactly start an entire Spring Boot container and then start firing JSON objects or JSON requests and then check the response, or if you indeed start test containers. But even test containers could be part of a unit test if you do it correctly. So I would say we should stop thinking about, oh no, integration test. We should move away from that. No, your test should be fast. That's important, because if the test is not fast, it will not get run and you don't get the benefit out of it. But otherwise, any unit test is a test, is a good unit test. And if it's an integration, if you want to call it integration test because I start up Spring, that's fine. Then add more smaller scoped integration tests. But just get there.
It should be fast, but I think also reliable, right? Reproducible, not flaky, consistent in the results.
No, and I think so. I think that's a good definition. The moment that you add flakiness to a test, and even that is a bit tricky, because if I run my Spring Boot test locally, I'm guaranteed to run it. If I run it in my pipeline, yeah, I might end up with the fact that my container didn't get deployed correctly. So, but the moment you start indeed depending on sockets, network calls, then it starts to feel to me like an integration test, and you should definitely have those. It's very important. But they are never going to be big enough or never going to be thorough enough to facilitate everything that you need, and they're very bad for test-driven development because they're not fast enough. You cannot say, make a change, run it, make a change, run it. That will just not happen with integration tests.
Interesting. So stop arguing about what's integration and what's unit, and start thinking about how to make them faster and more reliable. Basically, that's the point, huh? Cool. I also heard once the distinction about social unit tests and isolated unit tests. An isolated unit test is testing just a single class, like most of us consider a unit test to be.
Yeah.
Whereas social unit test is like you described with context configuration, start this, and let's play the game with several classes.
And I really feel that the social tests, we should drop them. Oh, sorry, no. The solitary tests are really harmful, because the only way to make them work is use mocking. That is harmful. And besides, if you start refactoring your code, you say, oh, this is a big test. Let's refactor this. Then what should you do? Split your tests? That feels so wrong. You're like, oh, wait, I have this test. It covers everything. I refactor it.
As you crack the production, you might feel obliged to crack the tests, where in fact you might not need to if the complexity is not that high yet.
Exactly. And that's so that also drives TDD, where you say, I just do the code that is needed to solve the problem, and I refactor later on. And if you then have all these mock tests, all those isolated tests, it will actually stop you from the refactoring. And that's really harmful in that way. So I don't care how you call your tests. I just want them to have a big scope, because then if you have a test against a stable API, you can make you go ham on the other side. You can do whatever you want. You can, for example, what if I have a lot of mappers and one day I wake up and I feel like, oh, we have this very nice framework to do all the mappers away. What's it called? It's called, I remembered it before I started this presentation. Now I lost it. But it actually, it generates interfaces, and based on the interface, no, it's not MapStruct. It's
the other one is
it's extremely nice. It's like Lombok for mappers. What if you introduce that in a 7-layer thick, deep mapper structure? It will just not work. It will just it could be MapStruct, but I'm I'm a bit curious. It's the one where you define an interface and then it will just auto-generate your mapper code. It could be MapStruct indeed, but if you would introduce something with only isolated unit tests, you can throw out all your test code. Then what? So by moving it big, and I think also this problem wasn't that big when we started doing Java, when we were already happy when we had the 3-layer architecture with a big controller and a big service. And then if we had Hibernate, a small database, a small data layer. But when we started realizing that we should split up our classes in smaller things, when we started doing domain-driven development and all this kind of stuff, that is when those Mockers approach really hit us badly. Because if you have only 3 classes in your flow, you can get a long way with just having those mocks there. But if you start having many more smaller classes, and you have
there are too many integration points, and if you put mocks everywhere, you're doomed.
And if you think about what is the whole point of being a Java object, it's to interact with other objects. If we don't interact, we're dead code. And we all know where dead code should be. That should be in the trash can. So there's hardly any point to test classes in such a small session. And as I feel, it's really harmful. And I think that is what we should all realize. And I also see, it took me some time, also had some discussions there, people saying when this was posted on LinkedIn, someone say, yeah, it took me like years to let go of this practice. And it took also me years to let go of this practice. I remember that I once was using Mockito to fake an entire Hibernate system where I would set primary keys and remember them for a later session because I had to set them on other objects as well. And it was like, I had like 15 lines of complex mocking code. I was like, what the hell am I doing? And then I realized if I just spin up a hash map in memory and I fake the entire thing, I could go away with all that stuff. But so somebody said, yeah, I've been on a journey to get rid of this and it took me years. And I just wonder, where did we all take the wrong turn? Where did we all decided, wait, let's use mocks everywhere. That's a great idea. So I think that comes from the fact that they said, yeah, tests should be isolated. Well, I think that they should not be isolated. I think that's the entire wrong assumption. And of course, in the days when this was invented, probably test meant that a lot of people would sit in a room and they would get a version of the code and they could only release that code if they had 2 or 4 weeks of testing and all the checks would be fixed, and they could not do releases, but they could do bug fixes, and that was very strict. And with unit tests, you get immediate feedback. And I really feel, and I think a lot of people who are now in the room also feel that if you write good unit tests, you'll actually improve your code quality so much that you get back, you get the QI guys that we stopped at Rabobank, we actually stopped having testers. We just make sure that we as developers, we have so much tests, and we also have a lot of integration tests. We even have feature tests. We have all kinds of tests, but they're all automated. So when we want to go to production, we just hit the button. All right. Our pipeline takes sometimes over an hour, but that's mostly because we have tools like Fortify and things that take a lot of time. But
yeah,
when it deploys, it's good.
That Rabobank is pretty. I mean, they deploy Java 17 to production, for example. Dragoš is a bit,
just now yet, but we're also a big company. But yeah, we take our coding very seriously, and we have all the room to improve on this. So I think we're really lucky with that. I also been in environments where people said, "No, unit tests are waste. I won't do them," and they were actually backed up by management. So I'm not happy at those places.
There is a question for Dragoš. Dragoš doesn't believe you are a test-driven development fan.
He doesn't believe me.
No. Although at the beginning you said that you loved and you... So...
And then I wonder why he thinks that way. Because that's of course hard to answer. I am a big test-driven development fan. I always try to do it. I made this test code actually doing test-driven development. And of course, as with most things when I'm coding, I was too late with starting and I want to do more than I did. So I did take some shortcuts at the end. But I always try to do test-driven development. It's the best practice, and I don't personally, I just don't understand why not everybody is doing test-driven development. But that will be something for another talk sometimes.
Regarding what you said about bigger tests, I want to point out to people one more thing. Ever heard of a honeycomb testing strategy for microservices? Typically, we are used to have the pyramid, right? Sorry for drawing on your screen, taking
Oh
advantage
no,
of
no.
you. This is unit test, this is integration, this is like system or ecosystem test. Well, this is, I believe this is more of a legacy from the age of monoliths. Now in
Mhm.
microservices, Google it. It's called honeycomb microservice testing
I,
strategy.
I
And
think you already showed this in other,
yeah,
I think last time.
you are talking about tests here, basically. Tests here that are testing a single system as long as deep as they can, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that's it's not mandatory to go as deep as you can. I mean, if you just wake up tomorrow and you throw out a few of your mock tests, for example, in a single service, like with those
And
members,
merge them together,
and just
exactly, like
merge them
merge them.
together, that's already something that's good. And I think this also fits in at Rabobank. We have the shift left, shift right, where we want to stop doing all those integration tests. We want to test our code before they are released, and we want to monitor production to make sure that we get everything right. We want to stop expensive testing. So I think it just fits in a way that yeah, if you make bigger tests, you need less integration tests. I mean, if you have, for example, we have very big JSON requests that we fire against our API, and they are expensive. I mean, we have to start Spring Boot, and we have to start some wire mocks, and then we can start doing those tests. And they are big and clunky. But I realized some time ago that if I just had a test that would spin up the Spring controller and then just initialize everything, I can get basically the same coverage except for the calls we do to backends, and I could run those tests much faster. Because right now we're looking like, look, we can add some more tests, but it's taking up time in our pipeline. So we should also perhaps phase out some of the Guardian tests. But if we had this test directly on Spring and left out Spring Boot, we could get exactly the same things. Because what is the gain if I can see that I put a big chunk of JSON to HTTP into a controller, and then the controller deserializes correctly and runs it? Of course, you should have a few of those tests, but they don't have to cover everything. But if I just throw in those Java objects directly and skip all the deserialization, then I can make the test much faster. And I can also, and that's what with machine gun testing, because they're much faster, I could make like 10,000 tests. And of course I will feel that, but having 1,000 would already be very, very good.
I think Valentina wants to say something, please.
Yes, so first of all, I want to say I really enjoyed this presentation. I mean, this is a topic which took me personally many years as well. For several years, I was doing, tests strictly coupled one-to-one to source code, similar as what Uncle Bob also described about how his approach to fitness. So I had a strong differentiation between unit tests, as in class tests, versus acceptance or higher level tests, and anything beyond the class was essentially for me an integration test. And I would say that that Martin Fowler's article regarding sociable and solitary tests helps, I guess, with that definition, because once someone moves towards a sociable unit test, then you lose that distinction about integration tests. You also liked the honeycomb diagram, which you showed regarding microservices, because that's the current approach which I'm taking. So since I apply hexagonal and clean architecture, I'm testing at the boundary, so the user side API or use cases. So it's essentially exercising the system in memory, basically. And only for adapters, I would do integration tests for adapters, so testing at the architectural boundary. So yeah, I just want to say this was a really great presentation, Peter. So
thank you.
I have more questions if you have time. I saw you at some point showing us custom-made builders. We discussed in the chat, and we said these are like testing DSL, testing domain-specific languages. My curiosity was, would you show tests written with those builders of yours, custom-made? Would you debate on those tests on the code base with a non-technical analyst or a domain expert? Is that a goal?
I
or
would
is
be
that a-
happy to. Yeah, I think that would be best. And I actually did that sometimes. I said, look, I don't understand this because yeah, we have existing calculations packed in Dutch, and we translate it to English, and we have to string them together as an orchestrator to make them work in a bigger microservice way. And sometimes I'm like, look, I have this test, I can't get this out of it. And yeah, it makes my business analysts are actually calculation experts. So it makes also talking about numbers much easier. But I think you should be able to sit with your business analyst and you should just tell them, look, I put this in, this comes out, this is what you want. I think that should be, and that's not like something that happens tomorrow. But I think it should be good
It's
to.
a mindset. It's a mindset.
It's a
you have
mindset also to be something that you should be willing to say, well, perhaps not this year, but perhaps over 4 years we can just throw out all those big Excel sheets and we can just give the business analyst commit rights to our test code.
Georgia proposes Cucumber for these feature files.
I think
they
that's
are
also a good
closer.
way, but also you can also this also moves together, because what will you do with Cucumber? You will have to make fixtures, right? You have to translate those Kurgan directives into fixtures, and if you already have test builders, you can then hook them up and already have a config that will just load as much as possible of your honeycomb. Then making those fixtures will just be easier. So I agree that there's a point where you will say, okay, I need fixtures, and especially with machine gun testing, that comes really handy. And then again, if you just make it really fast, it just makes having more tests easier. We have so many Cucumber tests lately that we had to increase the memory on our Maven pipeline machines because they ran out of memory. The default setting of I think 2 megabytes, 2 gig was just too little. So it also shows you that at least the Cucumber version we are using is quite expensive in that way. We have over 300,000 test cases. So I also I haven't done much with it, so I'm not sure if I just wonder if they're fast enough. And of course we are a bit excessive with how much we use, but yeah.
Good. There was a question from Guilam. I will paste it again in the chat if you can look. It was from the beginning. Relying on mocks to test a class should be considered harmful. A test that verifies that all the mocked interactors are called with the right parameters and exactly n times are basically a copy pasting of the implementation of the source code into your test code. And then they are almost identical, or you cannot change a line of source code without breaking a test. So again, he also talks about very fine-grained tests.
Yeah, so he's actually agreeing. He just has a much nicer way to say it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
conclusions everywhere. Yeah,
yes, yeah. Perhaps we have a lot of like-minded people in here, and I should go to the Mockist community. And
the Mockist community, yeah.
But I don't really think that those people will really be happy, because I can't. But that's perhaps I can't just fathom that people work this way, and I'm so happy. I think these are the people who come to you and say, yeah, but I did unit tests, but there was unit tests are just rubbish because they just take up time and they won't help you.
I'm afraid to start the next question. Today I did a 1 day of unit testing for a group of mine, and guess what? We talked about outside-in TDD, the so-called Mockist TDD style. And we did a kata together. It is far more complicated than a kata on classicist on Chicago School TDD, like triangulation. It's much more complicated. Mm-hmm. But the point that we saw together, at the beginning you start implementing outside in. If you never heard about this concept, you should read probably more about outside in or Mockist style TDD. when you start with writing top-down implementation from the application service, if you like, from the entry point down, and you mock your way in by putting mocks instead of the collaborators that are not yet ready. Now, what many people are missing in this game, when you finish implementing the components inside, the test that you wrote at the beginning either disappears or converts into a longer scoped test, like you suggest, by
Yes.
lifting the mocks and then
Yeah.
letting the real objects play together.
Yeah, I'm trying to
So-
think then what would be the benefit of just not putting mocks in and just start coding. The benefit is that you can already think about the structure. You can think more about the structure of your
You
main
have more
components.
flexibility. You have more flexibility about how you design. You can refactor freely, as like you said at the beginning. What did you ever have had that your tests are impeding refactoring? That's what you gain. I can shift the design as you like, but you also lose something. You lose feedback from those fine-grained
Yeah,
unit tests,
yeah.
in a sense.
It,
I mean,
well, I should perhaps I should look at Kata with you sometime and then see what the benefits are, because
yes,
I
probably
feel
yes.
that you can, if you do a purist TDD, you just say, all right, I just write the minimum code possible. So if that means that you just if you just make it, yeah, even if it looks silly, you just make it. So you don't think already from, all right, but this will be a shopping checkout service. So I need to call the payment service, and I need to call the
That's
shopping
exactly
cart
the tricky
overview
part.
service.
That's exactly the tricky part. How do you determine from the beginning the roles involved in your story?
Yeah,
That's why
but
it's much more difficult to do in practice.
and isn't that what you have to do with inside out?
Yes,
That you have
that's
to think about.
outside in.
And so I think it would be I think it would be a good approach if you have like a business process you need to implement, and you already know my business gave
The
me this
roles,
node
pretty
and this
much.
node and this node and this node, and I have to do these steps and how. And then perhaps it makes sense to set up it as a skeleton, and then from a work your way out from there. But why not just define a bunch of interfaces, then give them a minor a stub implementation and use that, and then start filling in that as well.
Like without mocks, just the
No
fake
mocks. Yeah,
implementation.
just make a fake implementation where you throw in a quick.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
what Ferdinand suggests.
Oh yeah.
Put some fakes in there as
Yeah.
if you don't like mocks.
I think it's a
True.
very powerful way. Also, if you wanna, I actually use this kind of when we had this feature had to finish today, and we're working with 3 people on it. So we just first made the flow in the application, and then we could all fill in those functions, and it make merchant. We could actually merge our code quite easily because Git was smart enough to then know, all right, if you expand this function, I'll put it in here. So no merge conflicts because we both added the function at the last line of the file. That really worked well. So I think outside in is not, if I understand correctly from the chat, is not really mandatory to use mocking. It just says, look, you cannot just start hacking away and coding and making. You need to think about your structure a little bit, and I think that's something we all do. We might. So I have to admit that I'm not a purist TDD. I also think about, all right, but I might need this in a few minutes, and I try not to do that. That's the hard part of a TDD. But I think the most important part about TDD is that you write those tests first and see them fail.
See them failing.
Because
Yes,
that
not
gives you the
anticipating
feedback
them.
that your test is correct. And then if you did not stop exactly at the moment when you should stop, well, you're forgiven.
or if you drove the design in the direction in which you foresee where you're going, again, that's not
so
the
yeah,
same.
I also have this thing that I also architect roles. Yeah, then you have to think. I mean, you have to think about your code, and for example, if you have an existing architecture, you have to fit in there. So why pretend to be overly stupid?
Yeah,
I mean,
don't play dumb.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So but I really like the fact that if it's read, how to complete it. That's something I really like about test-driven development. Then returning null because hey, you test still passes if you return a null object. That's not something that I'm really.
That's not the point. Yeah,
That's not the point. No.
Yeah. Okay, look, I would encourage people to, I don't know, maybe unmute and ask their questions if you're also comfortable with this. Perhaps I missed a question and you want to ask. Please feel free to come and ask again.
If people want to
Um,
get to the code I present, yeah, I will. I must admit actually that the code I have that I can share with you is not that. Let's do it though. It's not the best code. The best code is in production, and I cannot. I shared as much as I could already with you. Let's go to GitHub. Actually, this is the first time I actually made a.
Perhaps you should know we don't see anything. It's just the live.
No, that's
count.
because I'm trying to sign
Okay,
in
good.
and probably need
Okay,
to
okay.
use passwords, and I'm not yet ready to share that with you guys.
The password? No.
The password, no.
Sharing is caring. Very good, very good, very good presentation, Peter. By the way, very cool.
Thank
very
you.
cool.
I still.
And I must confess, at the beginning, I was laughing by myself around here. Bigger is bigger, bigger is good. It's big is good. Big house, big test. I am big. I like it. I love it.
Yeah, you have to do a little.
Of course, very good, very good. Very good.
Right. I don't know if I'll put a
Look,
post on the meetup where I will
yes,
share you the
exactly. That's the
repo, and then
perfect.
probably I
Mhm.
forgot to make it publicly available. Okay, Dragos, you have a
On
question.
the meetup. Yeah, Dragos.
Yeah, hey. Yeah, I really liked your presentation, but I'd be interested in learning about the process to do this, because yeah, just having the end result, the code, yeah, it's a source of inspiration and so on. But I was curious if you have some resources, some blogs, some whatever, which describe the whole process from how do you get from, I mean, you want to do TDD for this sort of thing, but yeah, where do I start? How do
I think you
Yeah.
should. I'm not sure if you are an employee or self-employed, but you should really then try to get a course with Victor. I think yes. I think he's really
Don't do
inspirational.
that, please. No. You should. You can find on Google the different TDD katas.
Yeah.
By Sandra Mancuso, by Uncle Bob, by me, by many others. You can find them. You can watch them. Are also on my YouTube channel. But the best is to work with someone. I mean, you can watch someone coding, and like I did at the beginning, I was pausing Uncle Bob, doing my stuff, and then resuming, and then pausing, and then doing my stuff. It's good at the beginning, but then you have, if you want to be creative, you have to have someone to learn to pair program with. That's the best way. So
Yeah.
pair programming on a TDD kata.
I bought the London versus Chicago
Oh, very good.
series and did it myself all alone.
It's very good. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you should try to get some colleagues enthusiastic about it. And I think we're all about making time to learn. So with my employee, it's no problem if I say, look, I want to do some kata, or they feel okay with that. So, and I think every serious team employee should do this, because you should get better at your craft. It's your craft, and you should improve that. And the only way to improve it is by actually doing it and practicing it. So just start. And indeed, there are a lot of TDD katas there, and I think I really got into it when I watched Uncle Bob's kata. You can buy his videos. I think they're 12. When I bought them, they were $12, and he has 2 videos on test-driven development. That really was an eye-opener for me. Then I really got the concept. But that's. But I think you can also find the same things for free online if you Google them. So it's yeah, and just start doing it.
Yeah.
And somebody said, yeah, can we use the community for this? Yeah. Perhaps we could set up a mailing list or something.
It's a lot of friction. I've tried it. Remote pair programming. It's a lot of friction, and also in physical setup, you can watch the non-verbal gestures, the feeling, the attitude, and you can communicate much more efficiently. It's tricky in remote.
Dragos,
It's tricky.
I'm still not happy with the state my code is in right now in this code base. So if you send me an email, we can set up a pair program for me for an hour or something.
How about that?
Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, yeah, I
Well,
still have some
perhaps
tests I
we
want to write.
could, with some help, if someone is willing to help a bit, we could set up such a like 1 hour or 2 hours. Like you try to play with someone random, and maybe I can go and help you 5 or 10 minutes to tell you some points about what you're practicing. We could. Why not? Why not? If you're interested in this, I will run a poll. Basically, I will send in the next
Yeah.
mail. I will ask people if they
And,
want
and
to.
we also did mob programming sessions. So I'm not
Yes,
sure
yes,
if you
yes,
already
but
watched those. It's you can do those. Those are very good with your close colleagues because you then learn how to. You can learn from each other's style and yeah, especially if you really want to learn this, yeah, just start. I suppose you write unit tests with your code.
look,
So next time you
Valentina,
write unit tests, make a test builder,
yeah,
and the next
look in the
time
chat.
after that, yeah.
Look in the chat. Valentina started a little community around the TDD and clean architecture. So ask your questions
Yeah.
there.
She's really vocal about this stuff. She was also
Very good.
yeah. When I saw her post, I was like, yes, somebody else who
And
believes in this.
I'm seriously considering also organizing something in the community, randomly pair programming, but should be some kind of pre-assessment to see how your level. Because if you barely know how to write Java, you can't pair with someone with 10 years of experience. It's not fair. So like,
It
you should.
depends on the expectations, I guess, from this
I know,
person.
but to be pleasant experience for everyone.
Yeah.
I would think. The ball is in my
Well,
court. All right.
yeah, but but you shouldn't be responsible for it being a pleasant experience. That should be the
Yeah, I should do my best.
participants. Yeah,
I
yeah,
should do my best. That's why I'm here. All right. Good. Folks, I have to do family stuff, but I don't want to end up this abruptly. If anyone else wants to chat with Peter, and if Peter has time to chat more,
I
please
said my family
don't
that
hesitate.
tonight, no family
No.
stuff tonight.
Oh my God, I can't.
I
They
made
will
them a
come in.
salad. They can eat it. And,
Big one. So if there are any questions, please don't hesitate. Peter also was kind enough to share his email in the chat in Zoom, so feel free to contact him. I will. It was such a good chat. I will download the notes, the chat discussion, and I will paste it also in the meetup page. Perhaps cutting your email out if you want, Peter.
yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, a lot of links in there, a lot of stuff to read if you want to learn more. A lot of stuff. So I will put it in the community. Good. Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Thank you all, and well, see you at the next event.
Yes, sure. Sure. So bravo. That was a very cool experience. Very cool experience. Thank you very much.
And
Round
everybody
of
who stick
applause for
around. Oh, yeah, there's a sound
Ah.
effect.
Of course. Good. Right.
And thank you all for sticking around for so long, and for all your questions. That is really, really great.
Great. So see you for the next one. Thank you, folks. Bye bye.